Meanwhile, yet another scandal is erupting. This one is connected to Azerbaijan, to the lawlessness of the investigative committee and the FSB, and to the victims. Because those who fall into the hands of the FSB or the investigative committee simply cannot be called suspects or defendants. They are always victims, because we know how arbitrarily cases are fabricated. The investigative committee, how much the FSB lies and invents things, but they are not limited in any way in their delusions, fantasies, schemes, and fabrications. We know how they, by what means, extract confessions. And now something terrible has happened. After two influential and respected Azerbaijani brothers were killed in the investigation offices, Azerbaijan demanded their bodies, the Safarov brothers, and without any hesitation, Russia handed over the tortured bodies to Azerbaijan. In Yekaterinburg, the Safarov brothers, well, any sane government would never hand over bodies that bear the marks of monstrous and excessive torture during arrest. In the end, they could have, I don't know, faked something at all, a morgue explosion, a fire, a kidnapping, but not give up the bodies. Nevertheless, Russia in general didn't care about this. It probably just got tired of pretending to be a civilized country. After all, no one has believed in this game for a very long time. And it handed over the bodies, and along with the bodies, it provided all the evidence. But these bodies themselves were absolute proof of monstrous, excessive, and inexplicable torture. And the fact that these corpses, the Safarov brothers, were severely mutilated became obvious at first glance to any forensic medical examiner. Horrific details began to emerge. However, this is what you might call, according to the rules of Putinism, torture in prisons has long become the norm and a common occurrence. The wording used by the investigative committee when releasing the bodies was rather amusing. They claimed it was due to heart failure. In the case of these brothers, well, you know, even the most superficial acquaintance with human anatomy should suggest that indeed, if a victim's heart is cut out, then as a rule, heart failure will occur. Nevertheless, Russia still doesn't quite grasp the scale of this scandal. It's unlikely to be fatal for the country, and it's unlikely that confrontation with Azerbaijan and the Azerbaijani diaspora in Russia will become the very factor that leads to division, turmoil, and war. I think this still isn't that kind of regimen. And the fact that they were so brutally on my Telegram channel, take a look. There are protocols from the inspection and independent examination of the bodies. I decided not to post the photographs there. It's just too much, too painful. It's really, well, that's something we can do without. So I didn't post those photos since they don't. The photographs of the Safarov brothers, they were sent to me as well, but since, as they say, they don't have any didactic value, I hope you'll forgive me for sparing you from that. Well, torture in general. Torture is a way of life. Beating out confessions is standard practice. But things like these, multiple traces of senseless, excessive torture, well, this is probably because torture is usually drawn out. It typically lasts for a month and a half, so as not to deprive FSB and investigative committee officers, well, first of all, of their lawful pleasure. But in this case, apparently they needed the testimony urgently. And this scandal kept heating up, getting more and more intense. And of course, it will burn new holes in Russia's reputation and remind the world that Putinism has long since legalized torture. This was already easy to see from the precedents, from the triumphant cries with which they cut off ears. On camera, on all federal channels, they cut them off. The ears of the suspects in the Crocus terrorist attack, but Azerbaijan, after receiving the bodies, did not stay silent, did not act modest, did not just grumble and publish some words or notes of protest. Instead, it went ahead and dragged Russia's face across the table, and no one has dragged Russia's face across the table like that in a long. The war in Ukraine doesn't count. Those are all military actions which are to the highest degree mutual between both sides. Azerbaijan responded to what has become the norm in the Russian Federation. This vile norm of humiliating foreigners. Azerbaijan rounded up some possibly random great Russians on its territory and treated them exactly the same way Russian Oman treats ethnic minorities and foreigners in Russia. And there in Azerbaijan, in front of the cameras, with the whole world watching, Russians got a taste of the so-called duck march. Check it out on the Telegram channel if you don't know what that is. And they also got a taste of rifle butts to the back of the head, boots to the ears, and so on and so forth. And in response to these, the masters of the universe, the arbiters of their neighbors' fates, the Russians reacted weakly. They just whimpered a little, and only on various social media platforms did the armchair fanatics truly start grumbling loudly about the urgent need to bomb the city of Baku. Taking the city of Baku in approximately 3 days, restoring order, as they put it, with those utterly damned Azeris, and so on and so forth, was their stated intention. Organizations like NOD, Russian communities, the 40-40s, all of them disappeared, kept their mouths shut, tucked their tails between their legs, and fell into deep thought. And the official reaction, the visible, public, staged official reaction was even more precise. Zakharova put on her saddest Hundskugel face. Out of all the expressions she has in her facial palette, let's put it that. Then Peskov appeared and sweetly purred about the need to further develop good relations with Azerbaijan. And as it turned out, there was no argumentation, no words, no logic, no reasoning. Moscow simply couldn't come up with any reasonable justification to respond to Azerbaijan's claims and actions. Well, maybe, among other things, the Kremlin simply wasn't at all interested in standing up for those who had suffered somewhere out there to the serfs, because abandoning their own has long since been perfected. The Kremlin has brought this to perfection. Well, we all understand everything. And we understand that if behind tiny Azerbaijan, there weren't the turbans and minarets of Turkey looming, well, probably some kind of response Moscow would have come up with. But instead, it tucked its tail, watched for a long time how quickly the great Russians mastered the art of the duck walk. Well, and then Russia started its own crackdown on Azerbaijanis. And all of this reeks strongly of very foolish revenge. To talk about who's guilty, who's not, who's to blame for some drug trafficking, who's involved in some currency or computer schemes, today none of that matters. It no longer plays any role. Real guilt, imagined guilt. It's already clear that any innocent person can be convicted and trampled, and any guilty person can feel perfectly comfortable Well, basically, Russia rounded up Azerbaidzhan. Of course, it started to mistreat them as well. We have to understand that old people, absolutely old people, due to their nasty evolutionary origins, old people to some extent, let's be honest, are pretty awful. It's just very important not to create conditions where this nastiness comes to the surface. But nevertheless, in Russia, all the conditions for this have been created. They've already pulled themselves together, propaganda is already thundering, and the trench hordes are already writing and posting videos from the front, threatening to massacre and punish Azerbaijanis. To bomb and burn Baku, and the television trench orcs keep on living, still in that ancient mirage where Russia is some kind of formidable and terrifying colossus, right? Where she's the mistress, both of the seas and the land, and the nations of the world tremble before her. Well, the orcs still do. It seems to them that for Russia, for their country, as Solovyov put it, it's enough just to raise an eyebrow for the nations of the world to wet themselves in terror. In February 2022, the Russian Federation raised its eyebrow all the way up to the top of its head. It hasn't been able to lower it for 3.5 years now. So it goes on living with its eyebrow raised, stuck with that very expression you see in the most severe cases of facial paralysis, with inflammation of the facial nerves. The expression is, you could say, both extremely frightening and at the same time idiotic. But not for the trench orcs who seem to witness all this shameful dragging, these millimeter advances, and pounding away at the ruins of a few Ukrainian villages, and the propagandists who should be in the know about what's happening. Nevertheless, somehow it just doesn't reach them. That, in fact, Russia has long ceased to be a terrifying colossus. It's just a shabby second-rate country now. Yes, it's dangerous, it's disgusting, but no one is afraid of it anymore. No one at all is going to say goodbye to it, because all its bad sores have become far too visible. All its decrepitude and all its atrophies. And this promise, the promise of all the heavenly punishments for Azerbaijan, the promise to come, to wipe out Baku, to teach them to respect the Russian people, all of this is on my Telegram channel. These are their threats. These are their direct words. Words you can't just take out of the song. I truly do not know where these relentless propagandists and the utterly drugged up, mindless orcs manage to find the fundamental grounds to persistently keep existing in this bewildering mirage, and how they continue to feed on this pervasive, deceptive myth, endlessly consuming it with such fervent dedication. Over and over again, they've devoured and vomited up the same old stew of Russian greatness. And even though it no longer even resembles stew, they still keep gulping down this slop.